said Joe in amazement. "The cloud has a hole in it, and the branches go up, and I believe we're at the very top of the tree. Shall we creep through the cloud hole and see what the land is above?" "Let's!" cried Beth and Frannie, and so they went. And this is where we left them, wasn't it? At the very top of the magic faraway tree in the enchanted wood. I wonder what happens next. Let's read chapter 5. The Roundabout Land. One big broad branch slanted upwards at the top of the faraway tree. Joe climbed onto it and looked down, but he could see nothing, for a white mist swirled around and about. Above him the enormous thick white cloud stretched with a purple hole in it through which the topmost branches of the faraway tree disappeared. The children felt tremendously excited. At last they were at the very top. Joe carefully pulled himself up the final branch. He disappeared into the purple hole. Beth and Frannie followed him. The branch came to an end and a little ladder ran through the cloud. Up the children went, and before they knew what had happened, they were out in the sunshine, in a new and very strange land. They stood on the green grass. Above them was but the blue sky. A tune was playing somewhere, going on and on and on. "It's the sort of tune or a carousel or a roundabout plays," said Joe and Beth. "Isn't it?" It was. And then suddenly, without warning at all, the whole land began to swing round. The children almost fell over, with the swing round beginning so suddenly. "What's happening?" said Beth, frightened. The children felt terribly dizzy, for trees, distant houses, hills, bushes, and all of that began to move round. They too felt themselves moving, for the grass was going round as well. They looked for the hole in the cloud, but that had disappeared. "The whole land is going round and round like a roundabout," cried Joe, shutting his eyes with dizziness. "We've passed over the hole in the clouds. We don't know where the topmost branch of the faraway tree is now. It's somewhere beneath the land, but goodness knows where." "We'll have to ask someone for help," said Joe. The three began to walk away from the patch of green field in which they were standing. Beth noticed that they had been standing on a ring of grass that seemed darker than the grass around. She wondered why that was, but she had no time to say anything, for really it was dreadfully difficult to walk properly in a land where it was going round and round like a proper carousel all the time. The music went on and on too, hurdy-gurdy, hurdy-gurdy. Joe wondered where it had come from, and where the machinery was that worked the strange roundabout land. Soon they met a tall man singing loudly from a book. Joe stopped him, but he went on singing. It was so annoying. "Hey diddle diddle, ho diddle diddle, round and round and round," shouted the man, whilst Joe tried to make himself heard. "How can we get away from this land?" Joe shouted. "Don't interrupt me. Hey diddle diddle, ho diddle diddle," sang the man, and he beat time with his finger. Joe caught hold of the bony finger and shouted again. "Which way's the way out of this land, and what land is it?" "Now you've made me lose my time," said the tall man crossly. "I shall have to begin my song again." "What land is this, please?" asked Frannie. "It's roundabout land," said the man. "I should have thought anyone would have guessed that. You can't get away from it. It goes round and round always, and only stops once in a blue moon." "There must have been a blue moon when we climbed into it," groaned Joe. "It certainly hasn't stopped since." The man went off singing loudly, "Hey diddle diddle, ho diddle diddle, round and round and round." "Silly old round and round," said Frannie. "Really, we do seem to meet the most peculiar people." "What I'm worried about is getting home," said Beth. "Mother will be anxious if we're not back before long." "What shall we do, Joe?" "Let's sit down under this tree and have a bit more to eat," said Joe. So they sat down, munched solemnly, hearing roundabout music going round all the time, and watching the distant hills and trees swinging round against the sky. It was all very strange. Presently a pair of rabbits lolloped up and looked at the children. Frannie loved animals and threw a bit of cake to them. To her surprise, one of the rabbits picked up the cake in its paws and nibbled it a bit like a monkey. "Thanks," said the rabbit. "It's a change from grass. Where do you come from? We haven't seen you before, and we thought we knew everyone here. Nobody new ever comes to Roundabout Land." "Nobody ever gets away," said the other rabbit, smiling at Frannie and holding out its paw for a bit of cake too. "Really?" said Beth in alarm. "Well, we are new to it, for we only came about an hour ago. We came up the faraway tree." "What?" cried both rabbits at once, flapping their long ears in amazement. "Up the faraway tree, did you say? Goodness, you don't mean to say that's touching this land?" "Oh, yes, it is," said Beth. "But I expect as this land is swinging round and round, that the topmost branch might almost be anywhere underneath it. There's no way of finding out." "Oh, yes, there is," said the first rabbit excitedly. "If we burrow down a little and make a hole, we can see whereabouts the faraway tree is underneath, and we can wait for it to come round again when the land swings above it." "Well, we came up from that tree just where the grass was darker than the rest," said Beth. "I noticed that. Do you suppose that as the roundabout land swings round, it will come back to the same place again, and we could slip down the topmost branch?" "Of course," said the rabbits. "We can easily burrow down that green patch of grass and wait for the land to turn round just over the tree again. Come on, quickly, there's no time to lose. All of them jumped up and sped off. Beth knew the way, and so did the rabbits. Soon they were back in the field where the ring of dark grass stood. There was no opening now, leading through a cloud down to the tree. It had gone. The rabbits began to dig quickly. Soon they found the ladder that led upwards. Then they made such a big hole that the children could see down it to a large white cloud that swirled round the roundabout land. Nothing there yet, said the first rabbit, getting out a handkerchief and wiping his dirty front paws. We must wait a bit. I only hope that the land isn't swung round and past the Faraway Tree altogether. The roundabout music went on, and then suddenly it began to slow down. One of the rabbits peeped out of the hole, began to give a shout. The land has stopped going round, and the Faraway Tree is just nearby. We can't reach it. The children peered through the cloud below the ladder and saw quite clearly that the Faraway Tree was very near, but not near enough to jump. Whatever were they going to do? Now don't try to jump, warned the rabbits, or you'll fall right through the cloud. But what shall we do? Asked Beth in despair. We must get onto the tree before we swing back again. I've got a rope, said one of the rabbits suddenly, and he put his hand into a big pocket and pulled out a yellow rope. He made a loop in one end and then threw it carefully at the topmost branch of the nearby tree. It caught hold and held. Good. Frannie, slip down the rope first, said Joe. I'll hold this end. So Frannie, rather afraid, slid down the yellow rope to the tree, and then just as she got there, the roundabout music began to play very loudly and quickly, and the roundabout land began to move. Quick, quick, shouted Frannie as the land swung nearer to the Faraway Tree. Jump, jump! They jumped, and the rabbits jumped after them. The roundabout land swung off. The big white cloud covered everything. The children and the rabbits clung to the topmost branch and looked at one another. We look like monkeys on a stick, said Joe, and they all began to giggle. My goodness, what an adventure. I vote we don't come up here again. But as you may guess, they did. There they are. Shall we read another chapter? This one's called Moonface and the Slippery Slip. Chapter 6. The children clung to the topmost branches of the Faraway Tree, whilst the rabbits slid down a bit lower. They could see and hear the enchanted music of the roundabout as it swung round overhead. We'd better get home, said Joe, in a rather quiet voice. It's been a bit too exciting. Come on then, said Beth, beginning to climb down. It will be easier to get down than it was to climb up. But Frannie was very tired. She began to cry, and she clung to the branch. She was the youngest and not so strong as Joe and Beth. I shall fall, she cried. I know I shall fall. Joe and Beth looked at one another in alarm. This would never do. There was such a long way to fall. Dear Frannie, you must simply try, said Joe gently. We've got to get home safely. But Frannie clung to a branch and wept again. The two rabbits looked at her, most upset. One put his paw into her hand. I'll help you, he said. But Frannie wouldn't be helped. She was tired out and afraid of everything now. She wept so loudly that two birds in the lift flew off in fright. Just as the others were in real despair, a small door flew open in the trunk of the tree not far below, and a round moon-face looked out. Hey there, what's the matter? Shouted the moon-faced person. Fellow can't get any sleep at all with that awful racket. Frannie stopped crying and looked at Moonface in surprise. I'm crying because I'm frightened of climbing down the tree, she said. I'm sorry I woke you up. Moonface beamed at her. Have you got any toffee? He asked. He liked chewing sweet things to eat. Toffee? Said everyone in surprise. What do you want toffee for? Oh, to eat, of course, said Moonface. I just thought if you had any toffee to give me, I'd let you slide down my slippery slip. You get down to the bottom very quickly, that way, you know. A slide all the way down the Faraway Tree? Cried Joe, hardly believing his ears. Good gracious, whoever would have thought it? I thought of it, said Moonface, beaming again. There it is. I let people use it if they pay me in toffee. Oh, said the three children, and looked at one another in dismay, for none of them had any toffee. Then Joe shook his hand. We've no toffee, he said, but I've a bar of chocolate, a bit squishy, but it's quite nice. Won't do, said Moonface. I don't like chocolate. What about the rabbits? Haven't they got any toffee either? The rabbits turned out their pockets. They had a very curious collection of things, but no toffee. Sorry, said Moonface, and slammed his door shut. Frannie began to cry again. Joe climbed down to the door and banged on it. Hey, old Moonface, he shouted. I'll bring you some lovely homemade toffee next time. I'm up at the tree, and if you'll let us use your slippery slip. The door flew open again, and Moonface beamed out. Why didn't you say so before? He asked. Come on, come in. One by one, the rabbits and the children climbed down the door and went in. Moonface's house in the tree was very peculiar. It was one round room, and in the middle of it was the beginning of the slippery slip that ran down the whole trunk of the tree, winding round and round like a spiral staircase. Round the top of the slide was a curved bed, a curved table, and 2 curved chairs made to fit the roundness of the tree trunk. The children were astonished and wished that they had time to stay for a while, but Moonface pushed them towards the slide. "You want a cushion each," she said. "Hey, you rabbit, take the top one and go first." One of the rabbits took an orange cushion and set it on top of the slide. He sat down in it, looked a bit nervous. "Go on, hurry up," said Moonface. "You don't want to stay all night, do you?" He gave the rabbit a hard push, and the rabbit slid down the slippery slip at a tremendous pace, his whiskers and ears blown backwards. Joe thought it looked a lovely thing to do. He was next. He took a blue cushion, sat on the top of the slide and pushed off. Down he went on the cushion, his hair streaming backwards. Round and round and round went the slippery slip inside the enormous trunk of the old tree. It was quite dark and silent and lasted a very long time, for the Faraway Tree was tremendously tall. Joe enjoyed every second. When he came to the bottom, his feet touched a sort of trapdoor in the trunk at the foot of the tree, and the trap flew open. Joe shot out and landed on a big tuft of green moss, which was growing there to make the soft landing. He sat there out of breath. Then he got up quickly, for he didn't want Beth or Frannie to land on top of him. Beth went next. She flowed down on a fat pink cushion, gasping for breath as she went so fast. Then Frannie went on the green cushion, and then the other rabbit. One by one they shot out of the little trapdoor, which closed itself tightly as soon as the slider had gone through. They all sat down on the ground, getting their breath and laughing, for it was really funny to shoot down inside a tree on a cushion. The rabbit stood up first. "We'd better get going," they said. "So pleased to have met you." They disappeared down the nearest burrow, and the children waved goodbye. Then Joe stood up. "Come on," he said. "We must get home. Goodness knows what time it is." "Oh, what a lovely way of getting down the Faraway Tree that was," said Beth, jumping to her feet. "It was so quick." "I loved it," said Frannie. "I'd climb up the tree every day just to come so that I could slide down that slippery slip again. But what do we do with the cushions?" At that moment a red squirrel dressed in an old jumper came out of a hole in the trunk. "Cushions, please," he said. The children gathered them up and handed them to the squirrel, one by one. They were getting quite used to hearing animals talk to them now. "Are you going to carry all those cushions up the tree to the Moonface?" asked Frannie in wonder. The squirrel laughed. "Of course not. Moonface lets a rope down for them. Look, here it comes." A rope came slipping down between the branches. The squirrel caught hold of the end and tied a bundle of cushions firmly to the rope. He gave 3 tugs, and the rope swung upwards again, taking the cushions with it. "Good idea," said Joe, and then they all turned to go home, thinking as they walked of the strange and exciting things that had happened that day. They came to the ditch and jumped across. They went down the little lane and through their little back gate. By the time they reached the cottage they were ready to drop with tiredness. Their mum was still busy in the garden, and their father was not yet home. So, sleepily, Beth made them all some hot milk, which they took up to the rooms to drink while they were sitting in bed. "I'm not going up the Faraway Tree again," said Frannie, lying down. "Well, I am," said Joe. "Don't forget we've promised old Moonface some homemade toffee. We can climb up to his house, give him the toffee, and slide down the slippery slip again. We don't need to go into any land at the top of the tree." But Beth and Frannie were already fast asleep, and very soon Joe was too, dreaming of the Faraway Tree and the curious folk who lived in the enormous trunk. We'll see what happens next time.